because in theory, if you didn't require some kind of method of verifying a person's authenticity, a person could just keep voting over and over and over again.
Yeah, it'd be like the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Like, what if everyone's obliged to have an ID to prove who they are, but if they decide to opt out of that, they can go around like a ghost or whatever, but they are, willingly acknowledging that they have no longer have access to anything that requires knowing their identification.
There should be a number that no one knows, maybe except you yourself, and you hand out like a public key. So you could use cryptography to solve this. So you can verify somebody's identity, the authenticity of their self, without, I guess, exposing themselves at the core, because that's the whole problem with the social security number. If that gets out along with a couple pieces of information, you're fucked.
Welcome to another kitchen sink microscopy.
Wait a second.
What?
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Do it. Roll back. I wasn't paying attention. I was looking at something.
You're welcome.
Okay.
You already get into the beer before you start the episode.
Well, we are celebrating the first episode of the third season. So sorry, go ahead.
Oh, are we gonna redo it, or should we just trip and fumble into the episode?
I think this is actually, well, let's just roll with it, right? We'll keep it in.
Yeah, we don't do redos around here. No. Which sounds funny coming from a scientist. Anyway, like and share and subscribe to the channel, and like and share and subscribe to the channel. What more is there?
And I'm Eric Rosenblatt. Don't forget, we write our own music, which is available on iTunes and Spotify. Can't do that for very long.
Sunday.
So stick around to the end of the show. Oh, we've had a few beers. Anyway, stick around to the end of the show, and you'll hear a new song because we write our own music. And if you're feeling a bit adventurous, you can go to our website at ksm.com for news and information and more. And check out our merch. We got some cool shirts. Just a few right now, but there's some new designs coming up, I think. Anyway, so Casey, what would you like to talk about today?
I think we should be runway models for our shirts, our swag.
I only have just like a plain black shirt, man.
Well, you should own some of our swag.
Yeah, I should.
People are going to say like, oh, it must not be good if one of the hosts of the show won't even wear it.
I've just got like a huge list of things I got to do. It'll happen soon enough.
All right. Well, anyway,
yeah,
I was really thinking of talking about, because obviously I'm a little too old to become a runway model.
You're never too old.
There's this, you've probably heard of this, right? Where there's talk about like, requiring photo identification for voting is somehow like racially charged, let's say.
Yeah.
So like
it's kind of a hot topic right now. Yeah.
Yeah. Like if you don't have identification, you're basically disenfranchised because they can't prove who you are, who you say you are. And in a certain socioeconomic chunk, it can be hard to have access to get an identification. So there's like an argument that there could be some kind of bias that, directed in some direction, whether it's like on purpose to actually suppress voting, or if it's just like kind of a circumstance of, plain old misfortune. I don't know. I thought
that's
a lot to talk about there.
No, that's a good topic. And there's a lot of angles to cover there. The idea that somehow there's some kind of racial motivation seems a little bit racist to me. Like, what, you mean black people? You don't think black people have the ability to get identification or driver's licenses or whatnot, or anybody else, whoever they are?
Yeah.
Seems a little bit.
That's a good point. Yeah.
It's kind of like it's assuming that those people, a whole swath of people, can't do something.
Is that what they call reverse racism?
I was going to actually do a minute microscopy about that, because I hear people throwing that term around all the time, and I'm like, you keep saying that word, but I don't think that word means what you think it means.
Yeah.
We'll have to talk about that sometime.
Yeah.
But it definitely does have something to do with socioeconomic status, not like skin color or melanin or country of origin or whatever, or your culture. Certainly, if you don't have, or if you have limited financial resources, getting a government issued ID is potentially something you wouldn't do, I guess. But the thing is, like, so many people have them, and it really isn't that expensive just to get an ID. I don't know. Now, and I wanted to follow this up too with like, I think I get where people are coming from with knowing, like, one person, one vote kind of thing. Like, isn't that what everybody wants? You don't want, like, people voting a whole bunch of times, because in theory, if you didn't require some kind of method of verifying a person's authenticity, a person could just keep voting over and over and over again.
Yeah, it'd be like the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Yeah, exactly. So how do you
12:01 a.m. I can vote again.
yeah, exactly. And maybe the problem isn't like requiring an identification, but it's like how identification is issued and the processes. Maybe it shouldn't be something we have to pay for. Here's the thing.
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah, because we're required to have that for a lot of things by the government, and other, businesses require it too, but it's primarily the government that requires it. And it really doesn't cost anything to issue an ID. I mean, what, a little card,
a laminate,
picture? Yeah, exactly. Like, a couple of bucks. They throw more money away, on their bathrooms and stuff. So I don't think it's that crazy for a concept for that to be, expected to be costless to the general public. Like, you should be able to just walk into a place, show some kind of credentials, whatever it might be, and get an ID. And they shouldn't charge you for that. Just a basic ID, driver's license. I get it. There's a lot more stuff behind that. There's a whole system and an infrastructure behind that. It's expensive to keep up. Sure, it makes sense to charge for that. And it isn't a requirement to be able to drive. It's not something that you have to necessarily do to survive in life. But, confirming your identity, that is something you pretty much universally have to do.
Yeah.
Government-wise, at least.
So, but here's the thing. Say we did make it free, but we also made it obligatory. And like you said, it's important to be able to identify yourself. And, likewise, I infer from that, it goes the other way too,
Mm-hmm.
Um, like you want to know others' identities and stuff. So what about making it obligatory though? Like, do you see a problem with that? Because that would be compulsory, right? Or whatever.
Yeah, I do see some potential pitfalls with it. Conceptually, making something obligatory isn't a problem, but it's how it's implemented that I could see some issues with. Being able to remain anonymous, I think, is a very important uh, feature, I guess, of being free and independent. Not being known, right? Not having a number, a barcode over your head, is something that that everybody should be able to do.
Well, what if, like, I don't know if there's a word for it where there's something obligatory, but there are like you get a pass or whatever. I don't know if there's a word for that, but like, what if everyone's obliged to have an ID to prove who they are, but if they decide to opt out of that, they can go around like a ghost or whatever, but they are, willingly acknowledging that they have no longer have access to anything that requires knowing their identification.
Well, and I think that's a fair point. And now, there, technologically speaking, there are ways of providing both, where you can have a unique identification, like a token or something like that, but also you as a person remain anonymous, like independent of that number. I recently did a minute microscopy about social security numbers and why they're a problem. And so if things were approached in an anonymity centric way, I think it would be possible to satisfy both camps, the people that want to know who people are and the people that want to be not known, generally to the public. Or even to the government, because you can actually satisfy all those people if you know what you're doing. So I think, like, maybe a different approach, random, or apart from just having like an ID number, like a social security card with a number that sticks with you for your whole life, like that is so 1800s. In fact, it's actually 1700s. We were beyond that in the 1800s. But I don't have a problem with there being some kind of central identification system as long as it's done right. But ask people to do things right. Like, there's no incentive to do that. They just want to put the stamp on your head and, like, oh yeah, you're another number, move along, citizen.
So what do you think of tying, see the social security number is more like a username, but it's used like a password, and that password has never been changed, right?
That is a huge problem.
Yeah.
And it's public. This is the thing. That's a problem with a social security number or your driver's license number or any other such publicly accessible piece of information. It's not obfuscated. It's something that's readily available, knowable to basically everybody. The social security number, like, how many times you go to apply for a loan or open a bank account or apply for a job or whatever, you write it down on a piece of paper and it goes in a file folder. How many people have seen that? Like, it goes into some system that people type it in. The person typing it knows that number. They know you. The system, how do you know if it's secure or not? And yeah, the number never changes. That's it. That's the end of it. And that's bullshit. Mm-hmm. There should be a number that no one knows, maybe except you yourself. And you hand out like a public key. So you could use cryptography to solve this. So you can verify somebody's identity, the authenticity of their self, without, I guess, exposing themselves at the core. Because that's the whole problem with the social security number. If that gets out along with a couple pieces of information, you're fucked. Like that's it. somebody merely has to know that and disperse it on the dark web. And well, yeah, your life is ruined. And good luck changing your social security number.
Like, visit us at darkweb.com
/ KSM Vidcast.
Now on the dark web.
But, you know, going back to what you had originally said, though, like, I think it's important. And I think this is a nonpartisan thing, that everybody agrees that each individual person should only have one individual vote. And there should be no extra votes or no votes from non-persons, right? Like that only makes sense. It's fair. Yeah. And how do you verify that unless without a system that can truly verify that, okay, this vote is legit? And you know, well, you know, government solutions, when all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And that's what's going on right now. They're like, oh my God, you know, we bring down the hammer. And it's like, no, it requires a lot more subtlety and intelligence and thought than that. But everybody's arguing about the hammers and the nails and ignoring the simplicity of the underlying problem, I guess. I don't know. Maybe I need more beer for that.
Like getting a lot of tools out here.
Yeah, but I don't think I honestly. Sorry, you were gonna.
Well, what about like tying? You know, we have the technology for something like this now. I'll grant this hasn't been around forever, but you know, what about tying a biological key, like maybe a chunk of your DNA sequence, to a particular number or whatever that, you know, like from only that one source, that one central source, so you don't like have a huge network of things like screwing things up. You know, it changes the password every so often, but it's always tied to that biological key that says this is who this person is, like in a physical
it's
sense.
kind of like two-factor authentication, right? So you get this number, this rolling number that keeps changing all the time, and it's based on a seed, and so all you have to know is that number during this time, and it's fine. And I totally agree. Like DNA, if you took enough of somebody's DNA, you could create a totally unique number that would be tied to that person. The key thing is that data should never, ever be something that's known by anybody. It shouldn't be like plain text, I guess. And that would make it actually secure. So you generate your cryptographic keys based on somebody's DNA or a section of their DNA or something like that, and hope that, you know, there's no coincidences, I guess, because that could happen. But that's a pretty good way to do it, I think. I mean, there's way smarter people than me that could figure that out, but I think that's a pretty good start. I mean, our DNA is by and large mostly unique. I don't know you could find two people on the face of the planet that have exactly the same sequence of DNA.
Twins.
Aren't they a little bit different though?
Well, fraternal twins, there would probably be noticeable difference. Identical twins, there's very minute differences.
But then a minute difference might be enough to differentiate
if you know where the difference is and it's consistent.
Well, and you know, maybe it's acceptable to allow for anomalies like that, like very limited situations like that. Because
I don't really know.
There is no perfect system. That's the point. There's no such thing as a perfect system. But at least we could do a lot better than a stupid, what is it, 8 character eight number code that we have for our social security number.
9 numbers, isn't it?
9. Okay, yeah. Well, more beer. But what you were getting to in the beginning is like, is it some kind of racially motivated thing? I mean, I'm sure it could be somewhere from some people, but it's also a logically motivated thing. Like, there is definitely an issue with people not knowing. There's no way to confirm that a specific vote is legitimate, especially if you have no requirement for any kind of identification, or you have loose requirements or something. I mean, I could see why people get skeeved out by that. How do you know? I mean, if there's no checks and balances, there's no like hard and fast logical, like programmatical system, I could see why people get or maybe think that system could be iffy, I guess. Yeah. And want to do something about it. But of course, they don't know what to do. So what they choose to do is the craziest thing. Like just, oh, well, we'll just legislate it. And oh, well, that'll solve it. Like, well, that doesn't solve it. You have to actually know what the actual problem is and know how it works and come up with a reasonable solution to actually address that particular problem. Like, it's just like, go, okay, the car's not working. I guess I'll just kick it a whole bunch, and I'm sure it'll work because I want it to. That isn't how things work, but that's how government does it. Okay, yeah. I've gotten enough of a rant. I think it's your turn to.
What were we talking about?
Voting and yeah, ID requirements.
Yeah, that kind of went out on like a boomerang.
That's what I do best.
I mean, like the question of whether it's racially charged though versus socioeconomic, I don't know. Like, you made a good point earlier about how like that assumption is almost a harmful thing.
Yeah,
it may not necessarily pan out to be the pattern they're looking for, is all I'm trying to say. If that makes sense.
The assumption that people like of different racial backgrounds don't have access to ID because they're poor or stupid or something like that.
Just stuff like that, and assuming because you see a certain proportion being larger than the rest of getting shat upon, and then you decide that is the intent was to shat upon them.
No, that's a good point. Yeah,
like it could have been happenstance, but you're going and applying this label to it and saying that this disproportionate affection is unfairly thrust upon us with intent.
Well, it's like the whole causation doesn't equal, or correlation doesn't equal causation thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, just because something appears to be connected doesn't mean it necessarily is, no matter how much you might think it is.
Right.
But
on the flip side, it's not paranoia either, because it's justified skepticism.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm sure things like that do happen. I'm sure some of these kinds of processes do have their roots in some kind of bigotry, but do all of them? And just because something appears to be similar to something else doesn't mean that it possesses the same features. Like, at what point do you say, oh yeah, that actually makes sense? And what's the threshold? What are the criteria to have something be a legitimate, sensible solution to a particular issue, which I think everybody can agree is an issue. I mean, this is not just voting. This goes all over the place. Like, this problem is systemic, and not racially systemic, but like systemic as in we're dealing with like 18th century technology today in 2021. Season 3, episode 1 of Kitchen Sink Microscopy. Like, I think it's probably time for an upgrade. It's time for a change. The question is, what change, and who changes it, and how? How do we decide on that? And I think that's a big question that we can't answer in half an hour.
Well, it's a circular question, because where does it ever end?
Well, that's true. Well, and maybe it's more a matter of like framing things in a sense of like, what are we actually trying to achieve, and whittling down, like casting off the chaff and figuring out how to actually solve a particular problem in a way that is universal and simple. I mean, that's kind of the way I look at it, I guess.
Yeah, I've always thought that who watches the watchers, that saying.
Yeah.
I always thought about like, who watches the watchers that watches the watchers.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
well, that's true. That could go on forever.
Tongue twister, but like, yeah, who's above the next guy, right?
Well, yeah,
you can go forever.
What authority do they have to? I mean, you can watch somebody all you want, but what authority do you have to affect change? That's another factor.
I mean, that's basically how God was invented, right? Like, people are like, well, I wonder who's at a higher level than me, and that just like people's brains just kind of kept going up into the stratosphere, and then at some point they had to say like, well, somehow it just has to go poof, so let's call that God.
Yeah, there's one God above them all. That's a good point. But getting back to let's descend through the stratosphere down to terra firma.
I just discovered how the concept of God was invented. All because we started talking about ID suppression.
Well, and you don't okay, here's the thing. Maybe it doesn't have to be something as hard and fast and personal as DNA. Maybe it could just be you push a button at a certain time and there's an atomic clock or some kind of system running that generates a completely random number when you push that button, and that's the number that's assigned to you. Now, I don't like being given a number, but that's just how it works. Like, you have to have a way of identifying you as an individual and making sure that you're not somebody else. Just the way it works. It works.
I am the new number 2. You are number 6. I am not a number. I am a free man.
Oh man. Anybody who gets that in the comments, thumbs up for that. But the thing is, we do need that. I mean, the internet works that way, computers work that way, security works that way. You have to have a way of ensuring that the person performing an act is authorized to do so. And the only way to do it is some kind of identification system. That's just how it is. And when it comes to voting, I think everybody could agree that like only one person should vote one time. And so how do we ensure that happens without undue stress or cost to the general public. How can we ensure that? You know, I and I don't think it's too much to ask that people identify themselves. I mean, personally, I don't think that voting is like that big of a deal, but it is to a lot of people. So if it's a big deal to you, you should be very concerned about knowing that every vote came from an actual person and not from some machine or something like that.
So what if there was a situation where a person needed to assume a fake identity, you know, a witness protection or whatever? How would you do that if it were like at some point traceable to a certain number that's tied to you biologically, like DNA or whatever, you know?
Well, that's an easy one. It's like cryptography. You have the private key and the public key. You hand out the public key, that's good enough to verify and compare against the algorithm. So you can always change that. Nobody knows the private key except you, and maybe you might not even know it too, depending. But you can constantly generate new versions of that based on that private key. And so it's kind of like making those services that give you like a temporary debit card so you could buy something online, and then once you buy it, it's like gone.
Interesting.
So nobody knows the actual number, your true name, I guess, if you're to call it that. But they know your handle, and your handle could change all the time, but it's based on that true name, the source sequence, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, as long as there's some block, like you were saying, the private one or whatever, like maybe that's that block that can't get someone past that, you know, chain.
Well, okay, think about it like two-factor. Like two-factor authentication, right? Everybody's probably used it. You've got something, you put in some numbers and some information in the beginning, and then it just generates these numbers over and over again. They even have like key fobs that do it. You could hand out that number to somebody right now. I could hand you the number. I could pull up the number for my master key to the entire company I work for. But in like 10 seconds, it's gone. You could type that in and it doesn't mean anything because the number isn't the thing. The number is comparing against the original sequence of numbers. So the number doesn't mean anything, but it's based on that.
This conversation is starting to sound like the sequence of events that leads up to Skynet. Wait a minute. I have to go. I'll be back. What have we done?
Oh no. Skynet activated. Well, it isn't that outrageous. It's basic cryptography. But so the thing about doing a system like that is it allows you to anonymize yourself without issue, but also still be able to identify yourself definitively. So it kind of like the temporary debit cards. Okay, it's a legit debit card, but it only has enough to pay for the thing you're paying for, and then it's gone after you pay for it. And the same works with that. And we could do like a two-factor identification for people too.
That is really trippy.
And it wouldn't, this is the thing, it wouldn't cost anything. Fuck, here's the thing. they say like, oh, identification card and blah 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 and stuff. And it's like, I drive all around. Well, I haven't driven through Seattle in a while, but downtown Tacoma and stuff, and there's homeless people all over the place. They have
Oh yeah.
smartphones. They have nicer smartphones than I do. I mean, of course, I'm rocking the BlackBerry, but the thing is, like, everybody has a phone. Everybody has the technology. So maybe we don't need an ID card. Maybe we need an ID system. And it could be digital. It could be material too. Maybe there could be a card that you could hand somebody or something like that if you really need to. But I don't think we have to nowadays.
I feel like this also could stem into a more philosophical identification, like who is me or I, or
Ooh, man. Oh, that is a heavy question.
Like, what says I am me?
Oh man.
Like, how do you identify you to yourself?
Well, I mean, damn it. Oh man, you're gonna make me think about like the infinity of the universe, and I'm gonna feel all small and like start questioning things and start tripping out. Oh man. Well,
oh shit, this is the peyote beer. Oh.
That's okay. I got LSD beer here too. Oh well, it's just space dust. It's all right. Well, yeah. What is a person? I mean, here's the thing. You look out there in the world. Well, I say you, but I look out there in the world and I see molecules and atoms, particles and energy and things, and they're all just moving around. Like the whole entire universe is composed of states of matter and vectors and energy levels and stuff like that. And like, what is actually even a thing? What separates a leaf from a tree? What separates the tree trunk from the ground? What separates a human being from their parent or something? Like, who knows? I mean, this is a pretty deep question.
Yeah.
Is your head where you are, or is it your whole body? I mean, you could cut your head off, but then you're going to die. So is the whole body you, or is it just your head where all the thoughts happen in your brain? Oh man.
Yeah, exactly. and that, if you could basically transplant thoughts into another body entirely, like if that were possible someday, which one of those would be you? Because like you were just saying, like you kind of identify yourself, but if you were to change that entirely all of a sudden, like from a perceptory sort of angle, right?
Yeah.
Who would be eating this chicken?
Oh, well, is it? I mean, you're kind of bringing up like the ship of Theseus,
Theseus
thing right there. Theseus.
Theseus.
Yeah, like if you replace every single component of something over time, and it's no longer the same as it was when it began, is it still the same thing? And that's really it's kind of a poignant question with people, because our cells divide and we lose them all the time, hairs falling out and skin cells sloughing off. Like, are we still the same person that we were back when we were a kid?
Yeah, there's an inextricable tie between the material and the immaterial, like at what point do you cut that off? Like, because it is a little of both, right?
Yeah.
Whatever your consciousness is, I think most people would argue is not matter. It's more energy or something. I don't know. Hippie shit. But
yeah, I would argue it's like proteins and neural connections and
ectoplasm.
stuff like that. Ectoplasm. Ecto cooler.
I don't know. I forgot where I was taking that, but
well, like
ecto cooler.
I have a magnet of the side of the box on my fridge. Love that. But that's the thing. It's like if you replace all, let's take like a car, right? Imagine you have a 60s era something or other. I don't know, a Mustang or something like that. And you replace the engine, then the differential, then the drive line, then you replace the seats, the interior, you start cutting apart the body, you repaint it, you change out the wheels and tires, the exhaust. Like, is it still the same thing, even though all the parts came from now? Wouldn't it be like a 2021 Mustang, even though it's shaped like a 60s one?
But
that's the whole ship of Theseus thing. Yeah.
Does the piece of the thing that is changed matter that much to what your self is? Like,
no, it doesn't. But
you can get like a false arm if you lose the arm, but like, does that mean you're no longer you? Because that's a pretty big chunk missing.
No, it doesn't. But at what threshold do you consider yourself to be a new person? If you've replaced an arm, yeah, okay, that's just one arm. But what if you've replaced the other arm and the leg and your heart and your lungs and your head or something like that? And now you're in Skynet and now you have a atomic brain or something. Are you still you? And what makes you? Is you the thought pattern that you have based on the neural connections in your brain? Is that what it is, or is it the physical side of you? Like, is it the program or is it the machine?
Yeah.
Oh shit. Oh god, I just
if there was a thing that physically bound, things like thought to something biological, and that were replaced, if that piece that supposedly holds that on did not follow into the next body, like, how would you explain that? Like, say you did replace every part, including that one, yet your consciousness remained locked here, where like most things look like they're supposed to.
Well, and that brings up the question of what is consciousness? What is perception? What even is reality?
What's in this beer?
It's some LSD. It's okay. Just roll with it.
Why are you speaking so quickly, sir?
Oh man, I think it's a pretty good discussion, and based on a really important source topic too. Well,
yeah,
and
it's
like,
funny how that kind of ties together, doesn't it? Like,
well, it kind of does. Like, what is the self? Like, what is your identity? Who are you? Where do you fit into the universe? And at some point we're going to have to talk about, are we living in a simulation?
Oh, geez.
Because oh man, that I thought about that, and I went down a rabbit hole that lasted like 8 hours of trying to prove and disprove things and think about things. At the end, I'm like, nope, I cannot definitively conclude that we're not living in a simulation.
But how do the people watching us in the simulation know that they're not in a simulation?
well, maybe they're in a simulation that's in a simulation that's in a simulation that's in a simulation. Like,
see how
where
that
does
happens?
it end? And there's actually very logical, there's a logical foundation to all that. That like, it is actually more probable than not that that is the case.
Oh,
And it's all based on, like, do you think that we'll get to the point where our technology will be able to create a simulation of the real world in our lifetime? Well, not in our lifetime, but in humanity's lifetime. And if you think that's possible, then it's very likely that right now, all of this is a simulation.
Huh. Okay, who sat on the keyboard while they were programming it? Because, geez.
Well, it's like a game,
We're working out the bug right now.
Well, but that could be part of the fun of the game. Like, don't you want to challenge? Do you want to God mode your way entirely through life, or Mario, or Doom, or something like that? Or do you want to challenge, a legit challenge? Most people want a challenge, so they're going to opt for the challenging version of that game. Oh wait, we're going all Philip K. Dick now.
Some people play on easy.
Well, even easy can be really hard sometimes. It just depends on the game. And life, of course, played on easy is still fucking hard as hell. Oh man, how did we get here?
Oh geez, it was all
Voting?
over the place. Yeah, well, having
Voting ID requirements.
Yeah, voting ID required. Is it racially charged, or is it a socioeconomic thing? And then next thing we're talking about, who am I?
Well, I think all of this stuff, as weird as it sounds, is kind of connected to everything in a way. If you think about it, and if you don't think so, well, you're an idiot like me. More beer. Oh man, wow. Now you're making me question reality, as we all should. Honestly, like, questioning reality, is the first step in, like, understanding your place in the universe. It's kind of like being prepared to die is the first step to truly living. I mean, I know that sounds a little like a little Lao Tzu or something like that, but it's totally true.
So what if in this simulation we are representations of a punishment of an immortal being that they want to capture, enslave, punish, or whatever? The only way you could punish something that can't die is to trance it into another reality where death is the most feared thing. You don't know what lies beyond. What if we are just like a culmination of some immortal being's torture chamber?
Ooh, wow, that's dark, man. What if it's like a Total Recall thing? Like, we had a boring ass life and we wanted excitement, so we signed up to be some kind of super spy and live an exciting life.
Come on, don't bullshit me.
But what if that's what the simulation is all about? What if it's about, like, uncovering what if we're in an onion? What if these layers are very, very deep, like we may think we're hierarchically kind of at the top, but what if we're not? It's possible that we could be many, many layers deep, and we're trying to figure out our place in the universe. Like, what is actual reality? And so maybe we're running simulations and experiments and doing things and testing stuff, trying to find the glitch in the matrix, or whatever. If you're a fan of the Matrix, which I'm not, but I think it's a decent movie.
I
Total
like how you
Recall is a
just
way
ignored that
better
the other
movie.
two exist.
Huh?
I like how you just ignored that the other two exist. You're like, it's a decent movie.
Yeah. Yeah, well, sequels are, they have their problems. Um, yeah,
Oh,
that,
man.
wow, we've really gone down the rabbit hole on this one.
Yeah.
But I think it's a
Pretty
worthy
meta.
rabbit hole. Like, this is the thing. It's like, this is something that everybody should be thinking about, whether you're an atheist or you're religious or whatever. You should be thinking about this. What is the meaning of life? Where do we stand in the universe? It's possible. Everything that we see is just as is. There's no meaning to life. We're on a dirt ball floating around, flying around a black hole in the middle of an infinite cosmos full of death, and life has no meaning, and we're going to die, and boop, that's it.
It makes sense now. I know what God is. God is the beginning of the simulation. Somebody on the outside has to communicate with what's going to evolve inside, right? There has to be some cross communication, and they call that God. And then it shuts up and allows the simulation to run.
Oh man, wow, that's so deep. And to think,
So
I've only been drinking beer. I haven't been smoking anything. So damn. This is
God is just the next simulation up the chain, man.
Oh man. What a way to ring in the third season. There's a video about that very thing that you're talking about, like recognizing you're in a simulation. Well, I don't know. I'll think
I want
about
to
it.
be like Riker and like just be like, like bust the wall and it like shatters into glass in like 90s
Oh
CGI.
yeah.
And
Was that a season 2 episode?
No, that was later.
Was it?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was like a captive. He was being experimented on, and they were trying to get him to divulge some secret information or something like that by giving him like a fake reality.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and we can go to like the inner light. Speaking of Star Trek TNG, like, an imagined. Well, is it really imagined if you really lived it? Like, if you lived it in your head, is it real? Or do you have to actually physically interact with things? And then what is physicality too? And why does it matter? Ah, shit. Oh God. Okay.
So you could almost argue for, the reincarnation sort of angle there. Like, what if your consciousness is immortal and it just passes from existence into, or let's say experience into experience, and it's like always the same person, but it's in a different play out of events, a different
Well,
time.
I actually kind of partially believe in the idea of reincarnation from a simulation theory perspective, from gaming, right? Like, it's kind of like, you play a game and then you die, and then you go back and you play it and you die, and you go back and you play it and you die. There was a Tom Cruise movie, Day After Tomorrow, I think it was, originally titled Live, Die, Repeat, where he slowly learns how to deal with the system, and he's constantly like dying.
Yeah.
What if life is like that?
Well, a similar concept in Groundhog Day, really.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. What if life works the exact same way?
Or in Star Trek, where they got caught in that time loop and they found ways to leave messages for the next. That's basically reincarnation, right? Like, oh, last time I was faced with something like this, I really fucked up. I got a bad feeling now. And you get that déjà vu thing going on. And
and Data leaving the number 3 everywhere and stuff like that. And it was because so maybe Riker's we're just like these idea was the better one.
Like on the Z coordinate, like maybe there's just all this like fluid, different little like paper thin slits of reality, and we just kind of like blend through them.
Yeah. Well, okay. Like
it's like the shandy.
This is like mind blowing. A very good conversation, by the way. But you know, for those who think this, like what we perceive right now is true reality, I would say prove it. Prove to me that you're real. And you can't just say like, oh, I punched you in the face, therefore I'm real. Like that doesn't prove shit. You could do that in a video game. You could do that in a simulation, you know, like prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that this is indeed reality. I'm waiting.
And what if we only go to sleep because somebody is not at the controller? They're you know off taking a break or whatever.
Well, what if sleep is like your recharge session where you're charging your batteries and like
are we all playing androids now?
Yeah. Oh man.
That's a clue in it. All our phones are androids now.
E11T. Exit. He got that. Oh man. No, I think before we get too far in, I think that's a very big and difficult to wrap your head around moment to end on. You know, what is reality? Like, are we really here?
Did we discover what God is?
I am God. I am the king of the world, baby. Oh man. Yeah. Well, you know, for everybody that stuck it out to the end, welcome to season 3 of the wonderful, incomparable, and wait, I already said incomparable. Kitchen sink microscopy.
Infullable.
Infullable. Yeah, exactly. Well, it's totally fullable. That's the whole point of this.
Oh man, gonna be a good season.
Yeah. Well, and if you don't already have a beer, have one now. Drink up. That's some good stuff.
Yeah. We need to get paid sponsorships. Come on, beer companies.
Yeah, space dust. Jesus Christ, how much space dust have I drank?
We should be getting a cut of that royalties.
Yeah, like thousands of dollars of space dust over the years. Oh man. But cool, man. Well, if anybody has any ideas about things that we've talked about now or previously, I mean, we've kind of run the gamut here. Like there's I mean, we went from like talking about voting and voter ID and kind of ended on like, what is reality? Who is you? And I'd like to end on this rather somber but kind of positive. I mean, I guess there's a positive note there. This star system is revolving like stuff in a toilet around a giant black hole at the center of the galaxy. At some point, probably billions of years in the future, that black hole is going to suck us up and we're going to be no more. Well, we're going to be no more before then, for sure, because the sun.
Wait a minute. If we are a simulation, then is there even a universe, or is that just the simulation's perception of what reality is?
Well, no, it's like the game world, right? You know, you're playing in this game world, like all of the whatever the universe is, all these things, those are just simply avatars that are served up for you to play in, worlds or something like that.
Wow.
So you never truly die, I guess. That's not a point where we should go into the suicide episode again.
Oh boy.
Although, you know, in a gaming sense, that's a real strategy. But you have to
hit reset and do your life over again because we just keep replaying the same self.
Well, and how do you know? Your life began when you started to recognize the world around you, realize the world, and be able to interact with it. You don't know what happened before that. I mean, yeah, okay, other people could tell you, oh, this is what came before. But do you know that actually happened? How do you know they're not NPCs just telling you the storyline of the game? Therein lies the quandary.
Wow. Interesting. You know, I didn't think I would ever start to like buy into something like that, but it does kind of make sense.
It does. Oh man.
Computer and program.